Hey, I'm seeing participants start rolling into the webinar. Thanks for joining us for this month's episode of Perspectives. Show them the way. We're going to be talking with our career experts. Why don't you give just a little bit more time for people to show up? So while we're waiting, I wanted to share that today is National Love Your Bookshop Day. Love Your Bookshop Day. So if you're in the chat, just go ahead and tell us where you're dialing in from. And if you were trapped in a bookshop overnight, what section would you spend most of your time perusing? Would you head on over to sci-fi or maybe crafts or something like that? Just tell me where you're calling in from and what section of the bookstore would you spend your time in? John's coming in with cooking. I might do that too. That's a good one. Rapid City with romance. I dig it, dig it. Marilyn's got plenty of time. Romance and nonfiction. Here we come. Historical fiction. There's a new one. Look at that. Mystery. See, panelists, I am fascinated with our audience. They just have such great answers to all this good stuff. A lot of mystery. Comedy and manga. Very cool. Yeah. So we got one more minute till we're going to be starting the webinar. For those just joining, we're using the chat to say where we're calling in from. And if you were trapped in a bookstore overnight, where would you spend your time? Which section? Agatha Christie. Military history, fantasy. These are great answers. I'd have a hard time picking. I don't know about you panelists. I'd have a hard time. I'm probably magazines. I'm a sucker for glossy magazines. I'm a Cosmo girl at heart. Fantasy travel. Oh, Jill's got it. Bookstore has a cafe. Look at that. Jill's going to be just fine. Jill might actually make this happen. She might just find herself in the bookstore overnight. Golf swing. Yeah, Michael needs help with the golf swing. I get it. Very cool. All right. Well, we are at 12:02, so I'm going to go ahead and get us started. You can keep your answers coming in if you'd like. That wouldn't bother me whatsoever. And I'm very pleased to be introducing our panel today. So my name is Matt Pepsel. I am the godfather of talent optimization, but let me introduce you to three much more interesting people. I'm going to begin with Jessica D. Winder. She is the founder of Hidden Gem Career Coaching and author of The Hidden Gem Within. Jessica is an HR leader driven by a mission to transform people ops. She has been the pioneering HR executive at 3 companies, launching groundbreaking initiatives in talent acquisition, performance management, and diversity. Jessica, thanks so much for being with us today.
Thank you for having me. It's always weird to hear somebody talk about you.
I know, right? But this is why we do it, so you don't have to talk about yourself. That's even more awkward, I know. But I'll move on to Victoria Nickel. Victoria is the growth and retention executive and a career coach. And she is a dynamic and transformative executive and advisor with a 20-year track record of success in B2B SaaS tech companies from Series A to IPO. Her true passion lies in career coaching and mentoring leaders at all levels. Victoria, it's wonderful to see you again. Thanks for being here today.
Thanks for having me. Excited to be here and share.
And last but certainly not least, we have Emily Wilbrandt. Emily is the People Operations Manager at the Predictive Index. Now, Emily and I work together, so she asked me to give her a very heartfelt introduction. So I would say she is our beloved People Operations Manager at the Predictive Index. She's currently responsible for recruiting and retaining top talent. This includes talent acquisition, performance management, employee relations and engagement, and the management of PI's wellness program called Grow. Emily, thank you so much for joining the panel today.
Thanks. That was heartfelt, Maddie P.
It was heartfelt. Look at this.
It
right there for you.
You lied to
All
me,
right.
though. You said there would be like 10 people here, and it looks like there's a couple more than that.
Yeah, there's a few more than that. We love our audience for joining us each month to learn all about it. And today we're going to be talking about career coaching. So let's go ahead and bring up the next slide. I want to do just a wee little bit of housekeeping. The webinar is being recorded. And so if you're on the line, it will be sent to you in the follow-up materials. And throughout the course of the webinar, you might have some questions. You're going to want to use the Q&A button here in Zoom so that we're sure to see those questions. We'll be posing those to our panelists at the end of the show, or at least toward the end of the show. And you're going to want to stick around to the end because our panelists have some bonus resources for you. You'll be able to learn how to get in touch with them if you have any questions that we weren't able to answer. So that is our housekeeping. Next, we'd like to move on to our audience polling segment, which is all about our Menti poll. You can see on the screen, we have a poll link for you in the chat as well. You can use your magic phone and use that QR code if that works better for you. But we're going to go ahead and come over to our 2-question poll. The first question, how comprehensive are career paths in your organization? Ranging from spotty at best to we have a rough plan for many of our employees. Most of our employees have decent plans on record, or every employee is on a well-constructed path. So panelists, I'll ask you what you think about these results coming in. Any surprises? Any observations to share?
Seems pretty spot on. Spotty.
Very spot on. Yeah, yeah, relatable. Yeah, it's hard, isn't it? It's hard to have comprehensive career paths for everybody. So I see a little bit of skew. I guess we'd call it. I'll use my psychology nerd language. A little skew there toward spotty, and then in places, a couple people ringing it with having well-constructed paths for almost all their employees. Just to give another quick second for some more votes to tally. I know people were fighting that link.
Sounds like a very relevant topic for today, and hopefully our audience and even us will learn a lot about it. We definitely want to be leaning more towards the most employees have it.
I think you're right, Victoria. That's for sure. All right, let's go on to our second question. So this is a fascinating setup here. It's going to be cognitively a little bit more challenging. So you have 100 points to give out on a percentage basis. Who's responsible for career planning? Is it the executives because they set the tone? Is it HR teams because you all are the experts? Is it managers because you're the direct supervisor and manager of the individuals? Or is it the individuals themselves? So clearly it's a mix, which is why I wanted to create this question format. It says on a percentage basis. And what we're seeing is the average of the respondents across the group. So no single person, but interesting to see sort of the rankings and the ratings. What do you think, panel? Any surprises?
I'm surprised that it's the manager's responsibility. I mean, I think you will hear me talk about this is, I'm just surprised. Or the HR team. I'm like, really?
I back you up in that, Jessica. While I definitely think there should be a split between all of them, I'm surprised that individuals isn't the highest. That would have been my guess, and maybe
you'd have weighted that one a little
one
higher.
of the outcomes of this episode.
Yeah, I like how we expect very little of our executives. That much we all agree with. Like, let's leave them out of this. We got this. Don't insert yourself here. I tease, of course. All right, very good. Well, thanks so much for your responses. It really helps us shape sort of the mindset of the audience as we go through our slides in our presentation today and our panel discussion, which I'm really excited to get to. Now, I always like to put up the talent optimization framework. It tells us the things, the people practices in the middle that really connect business strategy to business results. So, of course, we have to design winning teams, hire top talent, inspire people to greatness, and diagnose the people problems that might crop up in our business. And one click from Rachel will help us see that, in my view, career pathing really hits on two primary areas. One is design, because it's the future needs of the organization. Clearly, that's an important lens for when we're doing career pathing. The other is inspire, because we're talking about managers and individuals and their work together. And then I put a little dotted line because in diagnose, if we find that people are having less engagement at work, if they're not as enthused about the company's future, this is an area where maybe some of the absence of career pathing that we saw in the earlier Menti poll might show up a little bit. So it might show up in some of either exit surveys or employee experience and engagement surveys, might tell us that we need to kind of tighten up a little bit when it comes to career pathing. So that was my non-scientific way of saying that those are the part of the aptitudes that really we start to hit on. But I'll go one more slide before we join our panel discussion here. And I always like to, exercise rip from today's headlines. You can see some examples here around almost half of employees saying that they lack support from managers. So think about how high managers ranked in our Menti poll, and knowing that nearly half of managers aren't getting the career support that they want. That's obviously a concern. In the middle, when we're talking about lack of growth opportunities, can be why employees quit. Usually rough. And I found this one was interesting. It's a little, I think it's related. Here's a Gen Z person who's saying that they turned to home building. So they skipped college, saying, you know what, to heck with it. It's not worth the money and the time. And some of these more non-traditional things, because I think that a lot of times career attitudes, for example, are shifting in the workplace. So just it's all over when it comes to the way people are feeling about career paths, which is why I'm really excited to shift us into our panel discussion. And Emily, I'm going to kick off the panel with getting your thoughts on this one. Let's start in the beginning and let's focus, as I like to do sometimes, on barriers. What is it that can get in the way, in your experience, of effective career pathing, like what we saw in our Menti poll there?
Yeah, I think probably two things that get in the way of a lot of things. So lack of time and lack of money or resources are two things that come top of mind for me. I think some of the ways we get around that or work with that is making sure these quarterly career conversations are pre-scheduled on the calendar. So I think day to day, it's super easy to get bogged down in, I need to do this, this, and this. And those things often rise to the top as priorities. And it's easy to let that career conversation or PD conversation like fall to the wayside. So making sure, I know mine right now are scheduled out for the rest of the year on the calendar. So getting those pre-booked, I think, is super important. And then when it comes to resources, I know internally here at PI, we have a couple different free options. And so we have like an internal mentorship program. So we leverage our senior leadership team to mentor folks that are, more junior at the company. That's something that, is not an expensive conference that we're sending someone out to. So, looking at those internal resources that you have is one way to adjust to those tightened resources if that's a barrier.
I like that. Make the time and find the resources. Don't be afraid to get creative. Victoria, I'll ask you the same question. So barriers, what's getting in the way of our doing this right?
Yeah, well, one of the comments I saw come by was that someone was more surprised that maybe managers or HR wasn't more involved in career pathing. And so I think the big barriers sometimes are confidence and experience, and I actually see it from all angles. I think it's confidence and experience of the person that wants the career pathing. Maybe they don't know what to do. They don't know where they want to go. They feel lost and they don't have the experience nor the confidence. But I also see it both in organizations and in leadership. Someone that might be a newer manager, they might feel intimidated or even potentially have imposter syndrome, thinking about, well, who am I to have a conversation with someone when maybe I myself still feel lost in my career, or I myself need career pathing. And so I think that that could be a barrier. And one of the ways that I've seen this successfully be done is obviously with a lot of support, and we'll talk about different strategies. But I think a part of it is also the mindset that there's something that we can learn from everyone. And I see that as a small way to try to get over that confidence and build the experience we need.
Nice. Jessica, I'll ask you to round us out on this one. What have you seen? You've got a ton of experience in this area, I know.
Yeah, absolutely. So I agree with, both of what they've said. I think it's so important for all of it. For me personally, I would say I never gave my career pathing over to anybody else. It was always me leading the conversations or saying like, I would like to do XYZ, or can I be put forward for this stretch opportunity? Or, I would be the one researching conferences or doing all of these things. And I had amazing managers that absolutely like mentored me, but I also had some not so good managers. And I am thankful that I did not put it in their hands, like I still was doing things like for myself to make sure that I was still growing. So I think one of the barriers is giving it away to someone else and thinking like the HR team's going to do it for you, which hopefully they are, doing a path for you, or your manager's going to do it. I think you have to own it. And that way, no matter what happens, you have somebody that might help you, but they might not. So a barrier could be handing it over to somebody else.
I love that response because you're really highlighting the importance of ownership, and nobody can do it for you. I can't do your sit-ups for you. I can't plan your career for you. You got to do it yourself. But you also didn't just say like, you came to managers and said, I've done the research on some conferences, some opportunities. Hey, there's a project. Can I get in on the project? So it's not like you're saying like, you're not coming to the table empty-handed, so to speak.
Yeah.
That's the right way, I think. It's got to be challenging working with people who are like, just, hey, you want to talk about the career conversation and they just won't engage. Oh, I don't know, because they're afraid, most likely, in my experience. But we'll see that. But thanks so much for sharing some of those barriers to kind of get us started. So clearly, as Victoria started to intimate, we got to get over this. We've got to solve some of these challenges. But I've seen this nature of this wide range of approaches when it comes to career pathing, and I personally experienced them too. Some are like, hey, here's one slide, fill it out. Others are like, hey, here's this massive document with more detail than we're ever going to be able to keep up, and everything in between. So let's boil this down to some of the key elements. And Victoria, you got us on the solution path here. What are some of the things that are like must have if we're going to think about a career plan itself? Like what needs to be in there?
Mm-hmm. Well, I'm going to say something that sounds very easy to do, but I promise it's not, which is simplicity. I think we all tend to overcomplicate things, whether it's, again, the person that's going to go into the career pathing conversation because it seems so big and scary and confusing, but also people that are trying to help and administer. Sometimes we're overdoing it, overthinking it. So I think it's simplicity in the design simplicity in the training, both of the person that's going to be guiding the employee along and the training for the employee on skills such as setting SMART goals or writing down your goals. Scheduling should be simple. Writing and actioning should be simple, as well as employee, manager, and HR accountability. It should be visible and as simple as possible to track. And sometimes it literally can be as simple as a spreadsheet, a self-reporting tool, even using some of the internal survey tools, anywhere where you can keep track of it. Almost thinking of it as it should be as easy as a walk in the forest rather than feeling like you're hiking a mountain.
I love that. You had me at simple, Victoria. I tell you, we have to understand managers are busy, individuals are busy, but the fact is this stuff is important. So if it's simple, it might actually get done. Jessica, I'll ask you the same thing. What are the key ingredients here? What are some of the must-haves for a successful career plan?
So continuing kind of what I just said about like it being up to you and owning it is a self-assessment. So a lot of times whenever I've gotten feedback that I maybe didn't agree with, part of it was I felt like I didn't actually evaluate myself properly, or I was not evaluating myself on the true expectations of the job. So sometimes there's a difference between like, I'm doing all of these things, but then you're being evaluated on expectations or the essential functions of the job. So a self-assessment is so important. Now, let's be clear, you can't do a self-assessment without some emotional intelligence. And like, you're not the best at everything. So like, what do you actually need to work on? And what can you actually like put in there in like action plan that you're going to take steps to complete? So that's one of the things that I've always been very open about. Like, I know the things that I need to work on. I might not want to tell everybody, but I know what they are and I'm trying, so even just doing that with yourself, I think puts you on the right path to talk to your manager about what you need to do to get to the next level. Now, also, I always want to say this too, is when people think career path and they always think you have to be moving up. That is also not the case. I want to be clear about that. You can be an individual contributor, be amazing at your job, and become an expert, and you do not have to go into a manage people track. And that's some of the things that I've run into in the past is people think like, oh, career pathing, I have to want to move up. You do not. I do not think that everybody needs to be a leader. I wish some people would realize that too. So I just don't think that's the case.
That's such a great call out. You can have a career plan that doesn't necessarily involve managing people if you really don't want to. That's the thing I see sometimes. They like, it's the only way to get more money. It's the only way to get ahead, or it's just what I'm supposed to do. Those are not good reasons to become people leaders. But Emily, I'll ask you to round us out. So what are your key ingredients if you're cooking up a career plan? See what I did there?
That was like a callback to the cooking section.
It was.
It's perfect. It's perfect. I would double click on everything Victoria and Jessica said. I think the thing that we haven't mentioned yet is frequency. So when I think of career pathing, I think a lot of companies can lean on that like once a year annual performance review. Like that's when we talk about your development. And I would encourage the opposite as best practice. I think the essential ingredient for me is really that ongoing feedback and ongoing career conversations. I think once a quarter is a strongly recommended cadence for this, but making sure that it's not just that once a year is really, really key.
I love these themes of keep it simple, self-awareness is key, and make sure we're having these regular, it's not a one and done kind of conversation. Awesome. See, rockstar panel. I knew this was going to happen. But I'll move us on to this one. I want to take us back to the Menti poll. And Jessica, I want to get your thoughts. When you look across some of those responses around executives, HR managers, and teams, let's leave individuals out of it for a second. Like, what is your thoughts about that reflection? It is kind of a team sport. Like, what are some of the different roles and how do they kind of support one another almost?
Yeah. So when I think of the executive team, I absolutely think the senior leadership team needs to be on the same page when it comes to succession planning, which then leads to career pathing. So they need to be bought into, we need to have people ready to go to, move into roles, whether that's like interim roles where people are leaving. Like I'm thinking like parental leave, like how are you doing stretch assignments for that? And so even those things are very important. So I think the executive team needs to be on the same page that succession planning is important, which then leads to your HR managers laying the framework. So whether that is in templates, whether that's in like making sure that, some managers that are not that strong have the support that they need, or it's, you know, automating everything that you can, like, you know, everything that you can put in a system and automate to give people reminders, do it. So I think that's the framework, like putting the framework in place and making sure you're holding your managers accountable. That's where I see the leadership team, or
Nice.
sorry, the HR specifically.
Yeah, so I'm hearing that 100%. So executives setting the direction, HR making sure that the system is in place, because asking managers to just roll their own and figure it out, it's that's not a good recipe, obviously.
Yeah.
Very nice. And then Emily, same thing, same question for you is when you think about sort of this team sport aspect, how do these different powerful parties get together to help make it happen?
Yeah, +1 to Jessica. Absolutely, the HR team, my team, what I'm responsible for is providing that competency framework and really standardizing the processes and systems. So that's definitely where I see HR's role in this, and being really transparent with the company about those things, being honest and clear about how promotions, how raises, how those things happen, I think is really important and another key to this. And then managers, I also love the piece you said, Jessica, about holding managers accountable. I think both executives and our HR team can kind of partner on that. I hadn't thought of that previously, but I really like that accountability piece. And managers really leading the way when it comes to like suggesting opportunities, providing the resources, and providing that ongoing feedback to discuss progress, challenges, and next steps. So definitely a +1 to Jessica's comments.
It's a huge point that if as executives, if we do our jobs, as HR, if we do our jobs, then it makes it possible to hold managers accountable because we've given them the scaffolding they need to be successful. If we haven't done those things as leaders, we know we have to go first. We have to do our part. So I love that. And I'll move us forward to the individuals, Victoria, to ask you, they showed up obviously on the list as well. You heard Jessica say that really that was her number one when it came to, herself as an individual. And so my question to you is what should we be expecting from individuals when it comes to, really leading and taking ownership of their own career development?
Yeah. So an analogy I have for this is really that the individual is in the driver's seat. It is up to the individual to drive their career, to own their career, and be in charge. However, also part of their vehicle, right, or their passengers is your manager, HR, different mentors they have, right? Their job is to give you direction when need be, feed you some coffee, to give you energy, maybe direct you on a different path if need be, or just encourage you. You can get through the storm, whatever that means. And sometimes what this means is we might need to teach the employee to drive before we can expect them to drive as well.
Gotcha. I like that. Emily, you have a lot of individuals that you look after. What do you think is their responsibility in all this?
I love the car analogy. I wish I had more car puns to like work into my answer right now, but it's too on the spot. But I think I agree. It's being in the driver's seat for individuals. And I think what that looks like to me is, I think Jessica, you said earlier, like the self-reflection, the self-assessment. I think that's a huge part of it. Individuals being proactive, so seeking out learning opportunities themselves, making sure that they prioritize their time for development activities, asking for feedback, not just waiting to receive it. And then another thing that I was just talking about with my team this morning that I think sometimes people forget is documenting it. So tracking your own milestones, updating your LinkedIn, writing down your new skills that you've learned so you can showcase your growth over time. No one else is going to track these things or write them down for you. So I think that's a huge piece that's on the individual as well.
And I'll go back to something that came up a little bit earlier too, which we have this notion that transparency creates trust. And I would never want an employee or an individual to over disclose something they weren't comfortable with. But I love it when we put ourselves on record and saying, like, this is something I'm working on getting better at. Like, I'd like to participate proactively in meetings. So that's something I'm trying to work on. If you see a time when I'm not doing that, could you hold me accountable on that? Can you mention it to me? Or at that point, that sort of, as an individual, being willing to share your career gaps, if you will, but also those things you're working on, that's a very powerful thing because now you can get a lot more input. So I think nobody's going to have a bigger impact on the career direction for anybody than that individual themselves. which is really important. But we know, and Jessica, I didn't mention at the top, but of course, you're one of the rowdy HR rebels. So last month we had 3 of your group on our panel, and we were very pleased to pre-announce that you're going to be here. This is a group of progressive HR professionals, as you can imagine, and I've mentioned before. And I want to ask you to help me understand how HR professionals like yourself can really foster a strong, productive partnership with executives specifically. I know there's a lot of HR pros on the call who are probably like, I wish I could get my executive to care about this stuff the way that I know we should, but they're busy with 1,000 other things. So what do you think when it comes to that relationship? How can we make it as strong as possible in this area?
Yeah, so what's worked for me in the past is the deep understanding of the business and where we're going. So last 3 organizations I've worked with have all been startup, early stage companies. I've kind of thrown myself in the mix to be like, whatever we're working on, I want to do a demo. I want to know the business backwards and forwards, because then when I say we need to do career pathing, or we do not, or we have all these gaps where succession planning is not done, then it's understood that I'm saying this because what if something happens? And so an example of this that has happened to me is we had someone have an emergency situation, go out on leave, and they were the only person that knew a lot of things. And so literally we had a conversation of, should somebody go to the hospital and get these passwords? That should never happen. That should never happen. You know what I mean? Like, think about the lack of career pathing, that this is the only person that had this data. So that to me was like a rude awakening. Like, who is your successor? Everyone needs one. And what is the path for them? And so that just cemented it for me, that like, why is it one person that knows all of this information? Now, mind you, that's not the case at most places, but in startup worlds, that actually might be the case with a lot of information. So be mindful of that. But I stopped them from going to the hospital. So, you know.
Oh, goodness. I love that advice. And I think it's so true that when you understand the business thoroughly, you're looking at it with an inherently different lens than executives who we have historically trained to care about technology and strategy and operations. We don't necessarily train executives the same way when it comes about the people part, where we have people experts in HR. So how versatile and how powerful to be able to say, I understand our business better than most, but I understand the people discipline better than anybody here. And that's what you're bringing to the table in those examples. And Emily, I'll ask you the same question. So you're thinking about this really privileged relationship, I would call it, between our strategic and our professional HR leaders and the executives on the line of business side. What have you seen, or what would you encourage for our audience in terms of fostering that relationship?
Yeah, I think the key here, at least at PI, has definitely been ensuring that career paths align with the organization's long-term goals and strategy and talent needs. And so there's times where, at a software company in particular, strategy might change or shift a little bit. Victoria nods as a former PI employee. She's like, you don't say. And so HR being able to pivot their, career pathing to align with an adapting strategy and vision, I think, is a key to success. Spoiler alert, but my bonus resource later to be shared is something called our leadership drivers, which is what PI uses as a competency framework, and it's directly tied into our company culture and values that we call Fabric. And so making sure that career pathing is aligned with that larger vision, but also your company culture and values and norms, and that all those things kind of tie together is something that I think works really well and has helped with our partnership between HR and senior leadership.
All right. Well, we'll look forward to sharing that in just a little bit. That was a big league tease right there. You're like a professional at this. It's unbelievable. But I'll shift gears on us just a little bit too, and it's to recognize that I'm a little bit older. Some of our audience probably didn't pick up on that. They didn't notice some of the gray whiskers I've got here. But it makes me think a little bit about the employee life cycle. So clearly, my career plan sort of idea of what that looks like now is very different than when I was 22 or whatever it might have been. So my question for you, and Jessica, maybe you can start with this on this one. How should we be thinking about career pathing, considering that increasingly now in the world of work, we've got this big stretch between Gen Z, who's the newest generation so far to enter, and even all the way through boomers who are still productively working inside of organizations and everywhere in between? How does the life cycle impact the way we should be thinking about career pathing?
Yeah, so one of the things that I learned at a previous organization from my COO is she coined the term like talent destination. So she talked about that we wanted people to come here and get better at their job, and they would be better off because they worked here, but there was no expectation that they were going to work here for long term. I mean long term, I mean like 5 years or more. It's startup, people move around. So we wanted you to come here, be better, and then leave and be great at what you were doing. So with that in mind, that is how our career pathing looked. We looked at like a year from now, what do you want to be doing? And we would even ask people, and I know that some people might not feel comfortable if, your employer asks you this, do you want to stay here in a year or two? And if people said no, we would basically set them up to be like, okay, well, how do we get you where you want to be? And this actually happened on my team where I was like, listen, we don't have another role for you in the next 2 years that would get you to the level that you want, but I can get you close and then you can go somewhere else. And that was in the career path that we knew she was going to leave within 2 years. I know that's blowing some people's mind that you could say that, but I was perfectly fine with it. Like, tell me what you want to do. I know that you can't do it here, and let's not make it a secret. So I think that the transparency has to be there, but that has to come with a lot of psychological safety. Like, I even helped her work on her resume. Like, I was open to it. That is not everybody's situation, and I realize that. But if you make people have these plans for, I'm going to do this in 5 years, like, what? Who? Where? Like, most people just don't do that anymore. So I think you have to have some honesty in there and like be real about what is actually going on and set people up to leave if they want to. That's my honest opinion.
It's so true. And I feel like that's the reality. We know, especially in early career, and let's be honest with ourselves here on this call too, a lot of times early career people find that they're not going to get a raise if they don't go to another company. There's no equivalent of like a stay bonus in many cases. So they find themselves feeling like they have to move around if they want to continue to stay on a certain earning trajectory. So let's be honest about the fact that those types of moves tend to, and they can happen across any part of the life cycle, but why pretend like we can't talk about the fact that you're not going to retire here? Like, very few people are going to retire at the company you're at, no matter which of us situation we're in, right? So I love that you're proactive and honest about that. But I'll move us into maybe middle career here. So now, Emily, I'm going to ask you this one. So somebody's got some management under their belt, maybe, or at least they've got a lot of professional working experience. I don't know, maybe 10 years or so. And what does career pathing need to look like for those people who are sort of in that mid-career stage?
Do I strike you as middle-aged, middle careered to you?
We have some middle career people.
Okay.
That's why I thought of you.
That's fine. When I think about the early career, I think a lot more about like exploration and shadowing and like those rotational type programs can be really helpful. And then when I think about the more middle career professionals, I think that's when a lot of people start to specialize a bit more in a certain area. And then I think the other next step is learning and development opportunities that focus more on like coaching and leadership training. And I think one of the big pieces to that is learning to lead cross-functionally. So I think a lot of early career folks really focus on their team and their niche and their IC work or individual contributor type work. And when you sort of grow and develop into that more, middle career professionals, or maybe you're leading a team or you're a representative of a function, that's when it's really important to start to learn a little bit more about how to work with other department heads, how to lead cross-functionally, maybe how to lead through influence. So a little bit more of that kind of leadership and coaching and training.
So as the role evolves, the career needs and the career path, therefore, also need to evolve to match. Yeah, I like that. And then Victoria, I'm going to ask you to bring us to probably my stage, our most senior workers. What does career pathing look like when there's less career left to manage? I suppose you can think of it that way.
I'm in that camp too, Matt. I'll join you in the later stage. What I find is most desired and needed at the senior level is really mentorship and networking. And I'll kind of break those two down separately. When I say mentorship, I think the best thing we can do is make connections. Yes, it'd be great for internal mentorship, and it's incredible that PI has enough of that senior leadership level and so much expertise, but sometimes that won't exist, especially in a smaller organization. However, those senior leaders often have worked with other executives in the past or specialists that are lifelong individual contributors in one topic or another, and making those connections can be key. I also think it's showing the path of how to best work with a mentor. What's a great mentor relationship, right? How prepared should you be to work with a mentor? I know that in my life, that has had the most profound impact on my career, and I truly believe on my success, is having mentors and knowing when to go to them, feeling vulnerable enough to share the right things with them, being prepared enough, respecting their time enough. So that's one aspect. The other one is networking and teaching what networking is. I swear, I'm not sure I ever really understood what networking was for a very long time. I really thought it just meant networking events. And then I remember when COVID hit, it was like, okay, I guess no more networking, you know? But what I've come to realize is networking is something that we as leaders, and especially at the executive level, need to be very deliberate about. And networking can be catching up with people already in your network that you know and keeping them updated, sharing information with them, being in touch with them proactively. It could also be being brave enough and knowing how to reach out to folks that maybe you're following on LinkedIn and have never talked to live, or asking a second or third connection to make a connection for you because you're curious about someone's career path or knowing something. So I think access to the right people and advice, encouragement, and a little bit of direction on how to best work when you are working outside of the org is really what's needed and helpful for folks, senior folks, to grow.
Yeah, if I had a magic wand, that's definitely something I would use to help really leaders at every level, is realize that there are people outside of your organization. You don't have to live within your 4 physical or virtual walls. And it's, if you build your network early, you can get answers, you can get connections, you can get resources, information. It's really something that is very, very powerful. So hopefully, as part of our career pathing discussions, we've got networking installed in that really for everybody, because that network is something you can rely on. Even if you have no intention of leaving, you've just got a question, or you're curious how other people have handled situations in their own career development. Like, what a great outside perspective to complement everything you've got from the inside. I dig it. I dig it. I'm going to ask us to think a little bit now about tools. I'm going to fast forward us just a little bit, and because there have been so many great Q&A questions coming in, I want to make sure we have a lot of time to address the audience's questions. But I wonder, Jessica, if you might get us started with these go-to tools, that I like to call them. So you're talking to HR professionals who are on the call, leaders, maybe the managers by extension. Like, what are some of your favorite recommended tools when it comes to designing career plans and career paths?
Yeah, so I've had some really good experiences with HiBob, and they I've seen them live and like doing demos and stuff like that. And it's basically like a platform management software. I've also used Lattice before when it came to succession planning and like knowing who can move around. So I think even like having a visual, I'm a visual person, like I need to see stuff. I need to see it in the org chart, see how people move around, see how it impacts people. So I do like those type of platforms for that very reason, because you know, once you get to like over 100 people per se, it's really hard to start mapping this out in your mind. So using a system is very helpful, because then that system can also help you when you're talking about succession planning and like the career path. So if somebody's getting exceeds expectations, what's their next move goes to the succession planning, and, you know, it can all feed together, because what I've learned in HR is that when you have a system for everything, leaders don't really like that. So try to make it all fit together.
Gotcha. Emily, how about you? So you got go-to tools here for you. What do you recommend?
I mean, I'd be a little remiss not to say the predictive index tool. In particular, I think the behavioral assessment is so key. If I think about how I've used it with past direct reports and their development, like just being able to understand what motivates them and drives them in the workplace is so helpful to help them figure out what their next step is. And then perform, and being able to set and document and track goals in that type of a system is so helpful. In general, like any performance management tool, I've used Lattice as well. I do think it's great. And then frameworks generally, competency frameworks. So another shout out to the bonus resource coming soon. That's a free resource, but
Things flying off the shelves.
Yeah, of course. PI.
I love it. Thanks, Emily. Well, Victoria, I'm going to ask you this final question I'll have for each of our panelists. I'll ask you to get started. what is the best piece of career advice that you've ever received?
Ooh, that's a good one. Asking for to end with some profound thoughts. I think one of the most memorable moments I remember, and this, I think lucky for me, happened pretty early in my career. I remember I was working with a sales coach that was pushing us pretty hard. And he went up to the blackboard. This is when blackboards were still being used, by the way. Felt like a classroom, but he took out some chalk and he drew a big, big circle. And then right next to it, outside of the circle, he drew a little dot. And he said that magic happens outside of your comfort zone. I'm sure all of us have heard that. And when I heard it there, I don't think the weight of it really sank in until I started seeing that every time I pushed myself, every time I went just a little bit outside of my level of comfort is actually where I grew. There were tears and a lot of emotion. It was not easy, but that's what actually expanded my circle of comfort. That's what expanded my skills, and that's what allowed me to expand others around me and push them further than they ever thought that they could go. And I carry that with me now because it's such a profound thing that you can continue growing and you can continue growing others as well.
Beautiful. I love that. Jessica, how about yourself? Best piece of career advice you ever got?
Yeah, so mine, it's like life advice that turned into career advice. So as a kid, I was super, super shy. And I would like not speak up. I can't remember so many report cards where it was like, she needs to, interact with other kids. And I wasn't having it. And so my mom used to tell me all the time, even if your voice shakes, you still speak. And that then grew into career advice because I had a humongous fear of public speaking. And so to get over it, I had to just no matter what happened, you just get up and you talk and you speak. And so that's just advice that I live by. Like, no matter what happens, your voice can shake. I can cry. It's okay. You still speak, you still say what you need to say. So I think it's important.
Nice. I love that. Emily, you've got the last word from the panel portion of the show. Best career advice you ever got?
It's a lot of pressure. I was gonna say build and nurture your network, but I think Victoria covered that importance in full. So the other thing that I have gotten from Jackie Doobie, our Chief People Officer, she always talks about not filling in the blanks. So really just being curious, asking questions, asking why, instead of kind of filling in the blanks in your own head, because you might not know the answer, or you might not be assuming positive intent. So just being curious, I think, is good career and life advice.
I love it. Very nice. Well, thank you, panel, for that lively discussion. I'm going to go ahead and remind our audience that we're going to have some time for Q&A here in just a second. So use your Q&A button if you have a question that sparked for you. And at the same time, we're going to throw a link into the chat as well. Recognizes the fact that we're using talent optimization to drive better business results through better people practices. So if you're interested in Predictive Index's approach to talent optimization and the world's leading talent optimization platform, or if you're an existing client or partner, you can go ahead and let us know that as well. We'd love to follow up with you. So we're going to go ahead and also bring back the slides because I want to tell you a little bit more about, backed by popular demand, we have a mastermind session. So continuing the conversation, if you've been in one of these sessions, you're like, we just got talking about careers. I want to talk about my specific company's approach and our needs. And you can't do that. Well, you can do that. Actually, 2 weeks from today, same time, August 28th at 2 o'clock Eastern time. We're going to have a small group complimentary coaching session with myself, and we'll continue this part of the dialogue and be sure to have the group provide advice to you as well. And I like to facilitate those discussions. And in fact, you don't have to take my word for it. If you click one more slide, please. We had some recent feedback that I just wanted to share about how the mastermind session was valuable and about how it helps the concepts and makes them stick. And it's really not just me talking at you, we facilitate it. So there on the Zoom poll, you can see that if you'd like to raise your hand and be considered for an invitation to the mastermind in 2 weeks from today, I'd love to have you and facilitate a dialogue for us. Okay, so thanks so much for doing that. And then we are ready for our audience Q&A. So the first question is this: How do we help employees know that a career plan can be a career lattice? Organizations are changing, so a path today may not exist tomorrow. So dynamic organization, sometimes employees take it very literally. You said I'd get it to software engineer 2 if I did 6 months, and now it's been 6 months, all that kind of stuff. Who on the panel would like to weigh in on how to help employees understand some flexibility when it comes to this type of career planning?
I can kick us off.
Yeah, please.
I think it actually starts with exactly what you just said, is letting employees know. So much about career pathing will vary from organization to organization to manager to manager. And that's why a big key takeaway and theme that I've really taken away from here is, you know, the individual is absolutely responsible, right? And a leading party with a lot of support, but you're the one, right? Using our car analogy, that's in charge. And so I think that if that's the case, then it is the organization's duty, right? It's on them to educate an employee, new employees, remind existing employees, or retell that story as your company evolves, maybe your values grow or new people come on board, whatever it might be, what the best way is to take advantage of the tools available, of the expectations around. And I think a part of that discussion is going to be how flexible an organization is and isn't. The reality is we like to think, oh, every conversation's really, or every organization is really flexible, but some maybe aren't. For example, let's say it's an engineering path and it's very, very strict because it has to do with skills. Maybe different than, let's say, a customer success or sales path, where there's a lot more agility, flexibility, depending on your skills or maybe your outside experience or whatnot. But again, I think that the organization has a lot of accountability here to help guide the employee.
I love it.
I
Jessica,
wanna
the next one. Oh yeah, go ahead. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
If I want to add one thing to that, is that I think it also is on management in HR to hold them accountable, to be mindful of the words that you're using. Because I have absolutely had managers that promise people things that they actually did not have the authority to promise them. So that is also something to be mindful of, is like, what words are you using? And then I'm always of the mindset of like, did you put that in writing, or like, how is that being communicated? Because I have absolutely seen people say, I was told if I did XYZ in 6 months, I would be promoted. And that manager actually didn't have the authority to tell them that. And so, and then it just creates this negativity with the organization and with the leadership team. So be mindful of your words as well.
Yeah, we're good at that, us managers. But I'm going to keep you on the hot seat here for a second, Jessica. Here's the next one, which says, I am completely aligned with Jessica's input on not handing career pathing off to anyone else, and the importance of individuals investing in themselves. Are there tools or training that could help managers instill that in their direct reports, or help empower direct reports to own their career more?
I think putting it on them. So I would say with my group right now, with my direct reports, one of the things in our one-on-ones, they lead the one-on-one meetings. So that has always been the expectation. Like when I show up to this meeting, this is your agenda, this is your meeting, you have time with me. Like, what do you want to talk about? And so one of the things that's always on there is their career. Like, what's going on, what's going well, how can I support you? And I set it up that way that you are the one driving. So I love the car analogy. I absolutely am going to be stealing that. So you are the one driving, I'm in the passenger seat, and I'm willing to help you. I'll get out of the car, I'll change the tire, I will do whatever I can, but I'm not driving this. And so I think even making sure that your team knows that like this is in their control, and then what you will do to support them. So I'm very big on having it all in writing. So we use Lattice. So we use Lattice for our one-on-ones. It's all documented. You can go back and see what you've done before, what's been said. And so also being able to keep that historical data is very important.
Nice. Emily, sometimes we get really easy softball questions. So I'm going to direct this one to you, my friend, which is, what if my manager is hindering my career growth?
That's a softball question.
Maybe not.
You should talk to your people operations team about this, and they should support you and help you. If your manager is hindering your career growth, I've a couple options. Like, one is genuinely go to your people operations team and have that discussion with them. That's what they're there for. They're there to support you and unblock you. I think one thing that we do here and that I recommend as a best practice is also skip levels. So if you're someone who has access to a skip level, which is typically a one-on-one with your manager's manager. That's another good place where you're, hopefully feel comfortable bringing that up. And if you have a strong relationship with your manager, which maybe there isn't one based on this question, but if you're someone who feels comfortable giving that feedback directly to your manager and sharing like, hey, I'm feeling stunted. I'm feeling like you're not supporting me in my career growth. It would potentially be a challenging and uncomfortable situation, but if that's something that you're up for, I recommend giving them that feedback directly as well. And as Jessica said, you are in the driver's seat. So maybe come up with a plan and bring it to your next one-on-one and say, I want to do XYZ things. How can you help me accomplish that? And so you really put your foot on the gas first, develop that plan, draft something, and bring it to them and say, how do we make this happen together? Those are your
Great
options.
suggestions. They're good ones. I'm hearing a holistic approach, which I absolutely love. Give them the chance, but don't put up with it, basically, and get some help from the people who can help you. I like that. I'm actually going to field the next one, and panelists, you can weigh in as well. In addition to PI, what tools would you recommend for employees to use for self-assessment for career pathing? So I'm teaching a class over at Boston College called the Self-Aware Leader. So it's all about self-awareness, which is awesome. And in addition to PI, what we're going to be using is we have Values in Action, which is a values assessment survey, very simple, free and easy. And we have 2 emotional intelligence assessments also that I use with students. So what I'll do is if you want to ask me on LinkedIn, I'll be happy to share those links with you to some of the examples, whoever posed that question or anybody who's interested, just connect with me and let me know. But there's lots of great inventories out there that help us have a more holistic view of what the employees' wiring is, what their preferences are, what their needs might be, so that we can use that in addition to what the organization needs to come up with the real win-win in a way that gives them energy and authenticity and empowerment and all the good things. I'll move us to this next one, which is, what is a recommendation for recognizing an achievement or a move in one's career path for production workers? In other words, what ingredient could be an award of the career path moves, like an incentive for the employee? Paper certificates seem outdated. So someone has done the hard work, they've moved up in their career, we want to celebrate that achievement. What are some ideas or things that you've done in the past, for example, to really get that good organizational culture of growth rolling?
Pay them. Sorry. I'm like, give them their money. People don't want
money.
they want their money. But no, I in all honesty, I absolutely do think if they move to the next level, we don't do the secret promotions where you get a title and you don't get money. So pay them what they're worth. And then I also think just recognizing, like making sure people know that people are moving up, because sometimes things are happening and you don't know what's going on in a different department. My last 2 companies, we've been fully remote. So we made a big hoorah about people moving up and like put it all over LinkedIn and like just made it a big deal that people were moving up, or if they made lateral moves. So if they moved from one department to another, or, all of that stuff was all recognized. But I stand by what I said. Give them their money.
Give them money. I love it. What a note to end on. Fabulous. Rachel, I'm going to ask you to bring back up our slides because I want to show the takeaways. Where to from here? So we have, for example, our LinkedIn information for our panelists. You'll be able to see that in the follow-up materials in the chat as well. And so definitely encourage you to connect with us if you've got follow-on questions that we weren't able to get to. But also, in terms of the next slide, I want to talk about some of our key takeaways. Jessica says that you can get your copy of The Hidden Gem Within. Fabulous book. I happen to have a copy. Love it. And also be sure to sign up for her course offering Leveraging HR Expert Advice to Ace Your Interviews. So that's fabulous. And finally, if you watch Jessica's Leaders in Learning interview, so all those links are available in the chat and in the follow-up materials. So thank you, Jessica, for sharing those. Victoria is asking that we visit Pay Forward Coaching for free career coaching and community support. And you can also find more of her consulting offerings at Victorious Ventures. Thanks for sharing that, Victoria. And here comes the big league tease from Emily. Check out PI's leadership drivers and rubrics. We've got a couple of examples for you. They can help you guide your professional development conversations. I say that you should steal from the best, revise them to fit your company culture if you'd like. But thank you so much, Emily, for sharing that. And for myself, my ask is that you subscribe to my monthly Optimal Leadership Tips newsletter on LinkedIn. It's brandy new, and it would really mean a lot to me if you were to follow that. This month's installment I just released this morning, and it's all about leadership styles. So have a look and share it with another leader that you know and love. It's great. And so now, as far as the follow-up and the session takeaway, I also have great news that last month you told us that you really like tip sheets. And so we created a tip sheet for you all around career pathing. And my recommendation is go ahead and grab it from the link or in the follow-up materials, read it yourself, of course, but also we design these so that you can share them easily with the managers and executives where you work if you're so inclined. We really designed them to help you share this information pretty easily, and it's a good read, and it really lays out the things that managers should be doing. So we just want to make it easier for you to do that. Next slide is our book giveaway. So I'm very honored to share my book, and this month's winner is Allison Choi. Allison, congratulations. You've won the book giveaway. I'll be following up with you to see where you would like me to send a signed copy, and very happy to do that for you. So I'll get us out of here with this one. Next month, we've got our back to school themed webinar, which is called Recess is Over, Why Learning at Every Level is Good for Business when you think about all of your L&D activities. That's going to be Wednesday, September 11th at 2 o'clock Eastern time, our normal time. So really look forward to having you join us again for that installment of Perspectives. Panelists, I can't thank you enough for sharing your expertise with us today. It's been such a blessing to have you, and it's such an important topic, and we can see from the Menti poll that we've all collectively have a lot of work to do. You've helped us to do that work. Really can't thank you enough for being here. And to the audience, of course, thank you as well for your time and attention. I hope everybody has a fabulous day today. Thanks to the Predictive Index for sponsoring, as you always do. Really appreciate you also. So thanks, team. Have a great rest of your day.